America is at a crossroad. Never before have we stumbled so spectacularly on the world stage as we have in recent years. The pandemic has brought many of our biggest issues to light. Homelessness and the mental health crisis have reached epidemic levels. Freedom of speech is under threat. Politics has never been more toxic, and corporate greed has reached heartbreaking levels. The climate crisis has brought a dramatic increase in natural disasters. Meanwhile, we stand on the threshold of artificial intelligence, which could serve as the best tool to help us deal with many of these challenges if we can keep the power out of the hands of a few. How do we deal with these many issues? By speaking radically, honestly about these challenges and their solutions. By becoming more enlightened to the facts and raising human consciousness, we can use this unprecedented moment in human history to create the most extraordinary advancement in our collective experience. I'm host Shaman Isis. Welcome to Citizen Journalist. Thank you. Hey, you guys, and welcome to Citizen Journalist. I'm your host, Shaman Isis, and I have a really fascinating guest today, and we're going to be talking about a super important topic. Dr. Roopan Gill, thank you so much for joining us for our episode today. I'm jacked to talk to you about Vitala Global and Aya Contigo. Am I pronouncing it correct? Yes.
Totally, yes.
Yeah, and the mission of the work that you do, just for the listeners to know, I had the chance to hear Vitala Global speak at an event in New York City recently, and it was so empowering. The women in the room were just on fire with just excitement about having a real honest conversation about taking things, important topics from sound bites to solutions. So it was really incredible. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us and having me here to represent the work and also to share a bit about our experience. So thank you. I'm super excited too for this conversation.
Yeah. Just so, can you please share with our listeners what it is that you do?
Yeah, definitely. So I am an OBGYN. So I do spend, I'm an OBGYN. I'm a CEO as well of Vitala, co-founder with Dr. Genevieve Tam, who you met in New York City. And we basically what we've been on this mission to do at Vitala is to really center the user and the community. So that woman herself that is seeking abortion care. So we're specifically talking about abortion. And we've really been intentional about that to address one of the most stigmatized issues in sexual and reproductive health and work in some of the most challenging contexts in the world. And basically, what we do is co create digital solutions with women and girls and their communities to support them in specifically self managing their own abortions, personalized contraception decision making. And we're also doing some work in the miscarriage space. So it's really about empowering women and making sure that they have the tools and the information to do the thing that they need to do for their healthcare in a way that makes them feel empowered and not stigmatized while they're going through that process.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I was really excited. I wanted you to be able to introduce our topic, as I thought you do it more elegantly than me. I can be a bit of a jackhammer sometimes. This is such an important topic. I think we all know that after Roe v. Wade got overturned in America, it unleashed a bit of chaos. But I always think chaos it drives the most important things that need to change to the surface, and that's kind of what we're going through with the post closures. The world's really kind of having a reckoning all
Yes.
over about people wanting things certain ways and others wanting it another, and we need those sort of pain moments for us to be able to finally level up, if you will. And so
Totally.
you guys are really leading the charge and having this conversation so openly and giving it grace and sincerity and clarity and honesty, which I think it's lacking, because we talked about this before we started filming. That conversation is so fence post about
Yes.
your perspective on your personal opinion about it, that so often almost none of the coverage ever talks about the personal journey.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get, can I ask how did you get here to this
Yeah,
place where
no.
you're leading the way for women to be honored in their personal choices through their journey?
Yeah, love that question. So like I mentioned, I'm an OBGYN, but I did extra training to become an abortion provider myself. I still provide medical care, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. And I think it's so important because I see patients day in and day out. I see women themselves, and then it helps me to think about ways that we can improve the technology. Now, Jen and I, both of us, we did our residency together. We're old friends. That's where we met, like about 12 years ago. And we're sort of black sheeps in our program because we knew early in those days, like we want to do something in global health. It kind of was like more about like working in low middle income countries, really supporting women and girls and people in these settings. And we like kind of went our ways and we're kind of figuring out like how does that look? Because to be honest, it's very challenging in our day and age. Um, with OBGYNs, like there's not many like us, like Jen and I,
Yeah.
who have that are OBGYNs and then running our own tech not for profit and have done all these other things. Most often it's like an OBGYN who's working full time clinically and then adds a little bit of this work to their, you know, day-to-day work. But Jen and I have been super intentional about that. And I worked for the World Health Organization. I was with MSF on mission with them. I worked in Yemen and Nigeria. And it was like kind of through these experiences of even Jen, she also worked for MSF. It was through these experiences of seeing things at like the local grassroots level while also working at sort of these higher level, policy with WHO and getting a little bit frustrated with the dialogue around localization and centering the user and centering women themselves into the solutions we're building with them, or well, it's like for them, but really I was getting very frustrated and saying, well, actually, like if we want to do this authentically, intentionally, in an empowering way, like we need to talk to the women, we need to talk to the communities, we need to co-create with them. And so with our personal experiences, we, yeah, just got on to this mission. To be honest, did I think that we would get to this point? Be, 4 years, we're 4 years old now. We had our anniversary yesterday. That
Congratulations.
we, thank you. Yeah, that we would be running an organization like this and doing the things we're doing and the impact we're making. But in the early days when we started getting an initial seed grant to do the work in Venezuela. So I think it's important to highlight that too. That's unique about us is that we started our work in a country that has a complex humanitarian crisis that has already a legal context where it's basically illegal and only to save a woman's life. And we wanted to show, we were like, with our experience, I had the hypothesis. I'm like, we can do this. We can show that this tech, a digital solution, could support people in a system where the system is failing women and for
Yeah.
them to be able to do it safely. And so in showing that, and then when the Dobbs decision happened, it was like, okay, the time is now. We can bring this solution and adapt it to the US context. Did we think we were going to be doing that? No, but we had the foresight early on that when we were creating our mission statement, our vision statement, that we want to create solutions for people that are living in the most challenging context globally, regardless, you know? And so, yeah, that's how we got here. I mean, there's a lot of other little nuances to our journey and our story, but it really has been driven by this deep fire and passion to do this work since we were trainees, even before
Yeah.
then, even before we met. So, yeah.
It's interesting because there's this real moment going on, particularly here in America, but I think it's global. Not only do we have a massive reduction in population in terms of new births going on in most countries, I think it's almost all of them.
Hmm.
But people aren't getting married. I mean, there's like kind of a battle lines have been drawn between men and women, and I think on a subtle level in America, that's being fueled by women getting to their capacity for being told what to do, and the horror stories that are coming out about what's happening in some of the states that have lost their, excuse me, you guys, if you've been watching my show for a while, you know I cuss like a sailor, their fucking minds. They've lost their mind. Some of these things, like and I just have to bring this up because this fascinates me about America. So there's I think it's Arizona where they're trying to pass the most antiquated bill
Yeah.
that originates from like 1864, I want to say. It's
Yes.
really old, but the most interesting thing about this bill that they want to pass, aside from the obvious, which is that it's antiquated and basically doesn't allow women freedom over their own bodies, is the fact that it was originally ushered through by a man who married three, three children.
Exactly.
He married three children, folks. And so that's what they're revitalizing, a law ushered by a pedophile.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So those kinds of things are kind of going on all over America. But for the first time in my lifetime, and I'm in my 50s, these conversations are happening where people are calling it out and
Mm-hmm.
in ways I've just never seen before. Um, what are your thoughts on kind of where we're at in terms of history? And there's
Yeah.
so much we could go so many different ways of that conversation, but just off the top of your head, like, what do you think about all the things that are going on?
Yeah. It's so interesting. When we started the work with Vitala, we were going through a phase where because there was a lot of changes. So globally, we were seeing actually a lot of positive movement. The whole green wave. I'm not sure if you've heard about this, like with the green wave movement that basically has come from Latin America, from Argentina, and then Colombia. We saw this wave of like feminism and activism and changes in the laws and decriminalization. I feel like this was a period of time in the first couple of years of Vitala, but then since the Dobbs decision has happened, and what we keep on seeing, and I just actually today saw a map that New York Times showed of what's happening as state by state is dropping in terms of their ban, like they're like dropping like flies in terms of more restrictive laws and around reproductive rights and abortion rights, and we try to maintain our hope. We have to be hopeful in this time, but it is also very scary, I have to say. Like, I think the fact that something like this can happen in Arizona in this day and age is a bit scary.
Yeah.
What's happening now in Florida, literally that 6-week ban has now been instated since yesterday. Texas has been going through its situation as it has been going since even before the Dobbs decision.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's also important to highlight too, is that the Dobbs decision is one thing, but I feel like the attack on women's rights in the United States, especially around Black and brown bodies, and that attack on us, has been something that was predating the Dobbs decision. It's like there is this like deep, I mean, it's history. There's a deep historical, structural sort of violence and trauma that is experienced by the collective. And I feel like the fact that we have that, and it's just not memory, it's not memories that just have passed. There is definitely stuff that needs to be resolved. Um, the other side of it, though, so there's sadness, but I think what I'm feeling hopeful about is the youth. To be
Yeah.
honest, like that part, for me, like witnessing what we're seeing now across the US with all the campuses, not around abortion, but what we're seeing with Gaza. But in the same vein, these activists are like our future, and
Hmm.
they're kind of taking the reins. And I see that actually not just in the US, I'm seeing this also in Latin America. I've seen it in the work I do at Sub-Saharan Africa. That's hopeful. And I feel
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's kind of where I'd leave
You,
that.
it's interesting. I talk because I'm a spiritual teacher, and author. I talk a lot about what people would call woo woo. But a couple of years ago, I really felt a shift in the collective, the global collective of people. We'd reached this education and evolution standpoint where the number of people in mind, body, and soul harmony was starting to increase, and that has a huge impact on humanity in general. And I really feel like when huge shifts like that are going on, the people who a part of me really believes this is like a gasping last breath of the patriarchy that is
Hmm.
clawing back any and everything it can to try to control, because they know they're losing control of women. Women are choosing to opt out of dating, of having children, of having families, of even, it's just the whole thing, because they've reached this point of disgust. And I think that's its own like pendulum effect of what happens. So I have a lot of hope that we're entering this phase where, that we're just seeing that, like, it's that last gasp, dying breath. And sadly, people have to get hurt for
Yes.
these kinds of moments to happen. But when I look at the younger generations, I don't see them tolerating. They're not tolerating a lot.
No, they're not. And they're
Uh,
hungry for it too. They're hungry for like the knowledge and figuring out ways that they can be active.
yeah.
Um, And I like that.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things about all of this is I had I do a live on X with Billy Dees, and we were talking about the college campuses, and people are like, "Well, I don't understand what's wrong with them," and it's like, how disconnected are the people in power that they're the American dream, and this is just particularly for America, but I think it's actually going on everywhere. You're seeing it with the farmer protests in France and in Germany, and people, the
Exactly.
average person is standing up and going, enough. And it's like the politics are a hot mess. I mean, our politicians are all bought off by big corporations.
Exactly.
It's so blatant in America now that and I know it's like that in Canada, that it's almost frightening that we've actually gotten to this obvious of a place.
Yes.
Um, the American ladder, I mean, the American dream, the ladder to that has gone. Housing is up 50%, food is up 30 to 50%. Like, and this is in since the pandemic, because these corporations are taking advantage of this moment when the politicians are so obviously easy to buy off and they can do whatever they want. And it's pushed our youth to this point.
Yes.
I don't believe this is necessarily, I don't get me wrong, I think it definitely is ingrained in what they believe is politically okay, not all of them, but for many of them. But I
Yeah,
don't think it would have gotten to this place if they weren't scared for their future.
exactly. I agree with that 100%. Yeah. I was going to highlight something that you said about the woo-woo side, because I have one other hat that I wear, which I try to incorporate in the culture of Vitala, and I also in our product, because I am also a breathwork facilitator. I do Kundalini yoga a lot. I really believe in these kinds of things, and the shift in the consciousness globally. And that I do feel, and that's why probably it keeps me resilient and hopeful. And we haven't given up, even though we're going through a challenging moment at Vitala at this moment too, because it is a challenging space to be working in when you're doing abortion work, and everything is always, you feel like it's resistance. Like you're coming, you're facing resistance all the time. And I kind of feel like, because of all the other work I do and the practices I have, and also just like my other identities that have also had to face a lot of resistance, just as being a South Asian, woman of color, and challenges with your family, like these all things are intersected. But I really appreciate that you mentioned that, because I really believe that we have to think beyond just ourselves, because there is so much more out there in play.
Yeah, we really have such an incredible impact on each other.
Hmm.
Uh, so for for our listeners, because I think for a lot of people, they hesitate to have this conversation. They're scared to have this conversation. They don't want to get political. What would be some advice for people in how they can, get more comfortable with this conversation and do perhaps try to support better towards the women's health?
Yeah, I think it is difficult, I think, because it can get heightened and political. It can get religious. I mean, there's so many pieces to this conversation that can be challenging. But I will say from my experience that what we think versus like when you actually have that interaction with somebody, sometimes you can find that there's a common ground, right? Like if I was sitting with you and you and I were not on the same page, just starting from a vantage point of getting a sense of where people's values stand. And I say this because something that's very core to how we do our work is that we do actually run these values clarification and attitude transformation workshops. And that's how we get the conversation going when we're going into communities, whether it's in the US or in Latin America, where it's very challenging. People have fear, people have their values, people are like, don't even want to talk about abortion. So we don't go in there being like, rah, 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 abortion, abortion, abortion. Um, you kind of need to read your audience. So what we've been doing is running these workshops where we really, it is a very like a human experience, because everybody brings to the table their own values and attitudes based on how they were brought up, their religious beliefs. And these workshops are amazing because you run them for a day. Usually do them for a day, and where people stand before you start them, and then where they stand afterwards, there's always a shift for
Wow.
the vast majority. So that I know you're asking like just for the basic list, like a person who's like wanting to have a conversation with someone else around it. I would say to really try to find level set a little bit, right? I think it's easier to come to a conversation where you can understand where someone else's values stand first, and then kind of start talk about the abortion conversation. I
Yeah.
also think it's important to center it around healthcare. So often I think it gets so politicized.
Yes. And that's all on
And
purpose because it's the fence post they can hang on.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
distract them with their socioeconomic religious training, and then they won't actually pay attention to the fact that it's her fucking choice.
yes, it's her choice. And also
It's
it's
her health
life-saving.
care. Yeah.
Exactly. Like I take care of people who, because I'm, I'm still a provider. There's people we take care of through Aya Contigo, but I'm an abortion provider here. I provide surgical abortion care in Toronto up to, 25 weeks. I have patients that it's like fetal anomalies, miscarriages. It's, basically it doesn't matter why a person needs the abortion, but it is healthcare. It's like, just like if I were to deliver a baby as well, right? Or it's just like if I was going to do laparoscopic surgery for someone for a cyst. Like, this is the where we need to get to in these conversations, is that providing abortion care is health care. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's difficult though. I will say, I mean, it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of grit.
Yeah, the training, the one thing that I had a spiritual awakening a few years back, and I had always been spiritual and a seeker, but it was this one of those powerhouse moments of like, it's time to get your shit together. And the blindfold really got ripped off to the systems and the power dynamics that are actually running most everything. And it was this almost terrifying in a way because I had bought into so
Hmm.
much. And we all do this. This is how we end up in unhealthy thought habits that create an unhealthy life experience because we only know what we know. And that's so hard for us to understand because we think of ourselves as being these independent thinkers. We're just like, yeah, but you got that thinking from somewhere. And
Yes.
yeah, um and when I try to have conversations with people about a lot of these topics, I see they get into that fence post thing, and it's like they can't hear. And we shouldn't be having conversations that are grounded in things that aren't related to the healthcare.
Hmm.
I mean, and that still fascinates me that that is actually what's ruling this conversation, particularly here in America, that it's not actually about the health of the woman.
No, exactly. It's everything else around it, and
Yeah.
nothing about that person and their health care and their body and their rights. But this is the thing, like I feel I don't want it to sound so pessimistic, but I do believe that women have been just set up to fail. Like I feel
Oh
the
yeah.
system is created in a way that is not on the side of women. Like if you think about it, right? Like it's not even when I think about it, because abortion is one piece, but like I've also worked in Yemen and Nigeria where I've taken care of people who are like in this day and age still child dying in childbirth. Not necessarily
Mhm.
related to unsafe abortions, but just even other things that we have the technology for here in North America, but people are not dying. So there's like this, yeah, there's this like dynamic I feel like that's put in place that makes it very difficult for women in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
And the
Just starting
system,
with salary. I mean, like that
yeah,
I never thought into the 2000 that we would be talking about this in 2024. But the fact that people don't seem to, and men don't support this conversation, they won't even have this conversation, which I think is incredibly telling, guys. It's time to wake the fuck up.
yes,
If
yeah,
women are making 20% less, basically, it's 18%, but in some places it's higher. And this isn't even, outside of America, it gets even worse. How do people not understand that that's setting women up for failure when most households in America, A, don't have savings, but the households that do have savings put less than 10% of it away?
yeah,
So how are women supposed, like this is such an interesting conversation. I think we're still incredibly divorced from how unequal it is if we just bring it down to that. We're not even talking about healthcare, the fact that it takes women 4 times as long to get diagnosed for the same things as men.
exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. And that we don't have even just the studies that are usually done on men and not as much on women. That's the big challenge we have. Even investment towards women's health related innovation is less than 2% of funding that's going towards that. Like there's so many layers of the system. So we could talk about, like, it can be very depressing to think about
yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah,
right? But it's good to have the awareness because that's what we're fighting against, so that we
yeah.
can know that, but then continue to persevere because there's still success is happening. We're still seeing movement, right? Like just
Yeah.
recently with the Arizona one, I think it's being the attempt is to make it that so that it doesn't happen. I saw, somebody on my team just posted something about that we may not go through.
Wow.
Yeah.
Uh, God, you just said something that struck me really powerfully. Oh yeah, in terms of and I think that the reason why the fear-driven tactics are utilized in media and everywhere else is to prevent actual conversation from happening, because getting angry or upset about truth is the go-to to keep us living in fear, which keeps us in this cycle of never evolving.
Yes.
And so being able to acknowledge these things but not allow it to take from us energetically and shift where we're at in this conversation, it's those kinds of conversations that show we're changing.
Yes.
We're not
Yes.
whispering this in the in the back room. Anyway, it's such a fascinating topic. Tell us about the app.
Yes. Yeah,
This
we
is so interesting.
yes. So Aya Contigo. So Aya with you. So it's in Spanish. It's Spanish first. It's an abortion doula, essentially virtual, that provides end-to-end accompaniment and support for people to self-manage their own abortion with pills. We have a contraception decision-making aspect to the tool as well. The app we co-created and launched it in Venezuela, but then now in the US, it's available for all 50 states. What's I think unique at the heart and soul of our app, because it is truly like your best friend in your pocket that is there with you, guiding you through the process, empowering you, and providing you not only psycho-emotional support, but navigational support through a virtual chat that we have embedded within the app, or you can access it through WhatsApp, and it's with real-time support with real people who are speaking your language, either if it's English or Spanish, and there for you through the entire journey. And we have these counselors available 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're hoping that we can increase that to 24 hours a day. But it really is our secret sauce, because honestly, like when people ask me about it, they ask me how you guys are different. I really believe like the fact that we have that chat and the model of care and how our doulas, like the virtual doulas, are talking to our users, along with the app, with providing the information in a very personalized, empowering way. And then how we embed it within the community and working very closely with, local communities and local folks. So yeah, and so that's what we do. We provide people with the access in the most restrictive places to self-manage their abortions through our virtual abortion doula.
Wow. I think that's so incredible. I would have loved to have had that. I shared in the when Vitala presented that I had a you've heard these stories before. I had a miscarriage when I was like six months pregnant, or maybe a little bit further along.
Oh,
And
wow.
my foster mother at the time, I grew up in an orphanage, and my foster mother at the time leaned over my bed at the hospital to tell me that it was Satan's way of punishing me for having had premarital sex. And it was and then
Oh,
I was like it was a very ugly moment, but she wasn't able to have children, which I think drove a lot of what she said. The nurses in that room, that it was the first time that I had seen people kind of really stand up for me. They stood back for a second and they were like,
how
"Did you
could
just
you say that?
go
Yeah.
there?" Oh, they actually kicked her out of the room, and I was like, "Ah." And so
Wow.
there's a soft place in my heart for people in the medical community who support women's health and understand how important those moments are, that they be beautiful and that the
Yes.
experience be empowering. I think a lot of people, I just did a feature for those of you who know about Soul Tech magazine. The second issue just came out, the goddess issue of Soul Tech magazine, and I did an interview with Dr. Gill, and I love that photo, by the way. I
Oh,
thought it was
thank you.
so amazing. And I know that if you read it already, Soul Tech magazine is a conscious living magazine. It has a lot about spirituality in it, and I know I've had some people go, you're touching on something that's about like that topic, abortion, in a spiritual magazine. And I was like, you're confusing religion with spirituality. Spirituality is about self-actualization and getting into mind, body, and soul harmony and becoming the best version of yourself. It has nothing to do with a woman's right to choose how she handles her family planning. That's
Yes,
about religion.
totally.
What do you think about that? Did it occur to you when I asked you if you would interview for that? Were you like, this is kind of interesting?
Well, yes and no, because I am so spiritual, like spiritually minded, and I'm so into these things as well, like around the wellness practices that I do. And especially like Kundalini, I mean, that is a very deep practice. So I actually loved it when we heard about the work you're doing and that you wanted to do that, have that conversation, because I myself have been thinking and reflecting, and I've had coaching sessions around this too, and how to be a bridge of these worlds. And I think we need more people like us, like you, like me, that are working in sort of this space where people think it's very esoteric and the spiritual and more ancestral, but also bringing in the evidence-based and the science and the rationale, because I think we need them both. But to
Yeah.
connect them, we need bridges, and the bridges are like people like us. So I feel for me, it was amazing to be able to say yes, because that is what also guides me so deeply. Like whenever I reflect on like what is it that uh keeps me so motivated or like inspired to continue doing this work, is because it is a reflection and a mirror of my spirituality. I feel though the coming together with my team, the empowering, it's because it's also the team I'm empowering. It's the women, the self-actualization, to really like it is an act, it's a spiritual practice. Like
Yeah.
that's what I was saying to my team often too. I say like running an organization feels like a always a spiritual practice, but I feel like even the intimacy and the care that we're providing for people in some of these most intimate moments um is also like an act of spirituality. You know, it's so raw and human. Um and I feel very like, yeah, it's all connected. It's all interconnected.
It really is. And I
Yeah.
really think in terms of the way you put that together so beautifully is that the younger generations and the women of the future who will be running this world need women who are saying, straighten your crown up, girl. This is your existence, your experience, and you are in complete command of it. And like really empowering them
Yeah.
and allowing them to see what spiritual practices are really about and removing them. You can be, I don't mind people being religious. I don't have a problem with it. For me, those are separate. That's a separate thing.
Yeah.
And being able to give women space, because we will be running the world.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes, we will. Yeah,
I think we kind of already are,
we
but
are.
we're just accepting that. Anyway, if people wanted to learn more about your company and find out more about Aya, you pronounce Aya Contigo so much better than me. You must speak Spanish.
I do, yes. Yeah, I
I
started
love it.
learning like when I was starting the organization, but my fiance is from Spain, so that also helps.
That does help. Uh, so if
Yeah,
people wanted
so
to, find you
yes.
guys, where
Totally.
would they
So
go?
Aya Contigo, if you're in the US, like we really want as many people to like know about it. Tell your friends, like, you can download Aya Contigo app on the Apple Store, Google Play Store. It's a web app, so you can also access it through like a web link as well. So if you go to our website, hola.ayacontigo.com, you'll be able to access our website, and then going to our website, Vitala Global. You can find us on LinkedIn, find us on Instagram. Um, yeah, I mean, I want everybody to know about it and share about it. And also, another thing I'll add to this is like people should also know that they can get abortion pills in all 50 states. So we're partnered with a lot of amazing organizations. So I want to shout that out too, because I think there's so much misinformation, but you can still get through online pharmacies, all 50 states, you can get abortion pills. Plant seed pills is amazing for information. I need an A, even M&A hotline. Some of these key resources can be really supportive, aid access, and for folks to just even know that they can do advanced provision of like buy pills and keep them in their cupboard, because you never know, and you can do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. So that was well said. Before we go, I'll tell you something that I saw that was on, I think it was on X or Twitter, and it was this and I'm a middle of the road. I'm a middle person. I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but it was one of the people who's really pushed the abortion restrictions in the country, and she was like, "These politicians sometimes post without thinking about it," and she's like, that the government is out of control when they start telling you what oven to choose.
Oh my
Somebody
God.
responded and they were like, and aren't you the one telling women what to do with their
Which with their
body?
bodies? Oh, with the bun. Ah, that's so funny. I love that.
And I
Oh
was
my
just like, oh
God.
my God, it was just so perfect. And it was like, get out of women's healthcare decisions. It's enough of that.
Totally. I agree.
It's been such a pleasure to get a chance to speak to you. Hopefully I'll get a chance to meet you if you come to New York or I'm in Canada.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Really enjoyed this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, thank you. You guys, if you're not already subscribed to Citizen Journalist, what are you thinking? I mean, we were just featured in People and Entertainment Weekly and a bunch of other places. So, you get on it and subscribe to support the conversation that takes, important topics from sound bites to solutions. And if you haven't checked out my book, I'd grab a copy of it, but it's too far away from me. If you haven't grabbed a copy of Memory Mansion, which shares my journey from Tennessee orphanage to the red carpets of New York City fashion, to depression and being very overweight, to happiness, then please go check out Memory Mansion because you guys helped make it a #1. So please do that. And if you haven't already reviewed it, please do that as well. Anyway, you guys can follow me on social media. I'm at Shaman Isis or at Shaman Isis Official, just about everywhere. And you can find out more about the show and all the work that I do at shamanisis.com. Anyway, you guys have a beautiful week. And thank you again, my dear. It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye, you guys.
Bye.